Welcome to Secrets Unlocked. If you enjoy intimate confessions and forbidden stories, check the private archive linked in the description. Subscribe, settle in, and enjoy the story. It was positively surreal, Gina thought, watching the costumed crowd. She had always loved Halloween. The costumes were freeing, the eerie atmosphere got the adrenaline pumping, and all the treats pleased her sweet tooth greatly. It also held a bit of dread for her. The secrecy of masks and the feeling in the air brought to mind the origins of the day, when the dead walked among the living. But this Halloween was special. She knew everyone there, hidden by their masks, but it had been 10 years since they had met face to face. The only one who she knew by sight was Diane, the host. She was dressed as a lady pirate, her domino small, and had greeted Gina at the door with the rules. No names, no personal questions, no guilt. Their college had been too small for a homecoming, so Diane, still in town and now a professor, had put it together. All the invite had said was it was for singles from their year, a fun 10-year reunion. Costume required, must have mask. Gina might not have gone if it weren't for the fact that she was bored, broke, and close by. Life in 10 years hadn't gone exciting places, and while she'd been working to keep the ranch afloat, it seemed life had passed her by. A real reunion would have been depressing. Surely by now Bobby Williams was a big attorney and Mary Farnsworth she knew had had a nose job and a name change, and was on Hollywood's B-list working her way up to first string. But a Halloween party was irresistible. This year it was on a Wednesday, and the actual night her ranch had several events for guests to spice up the slow season, but this was the Friday before, and she'd come expecting at least an interesting time. There were 40 people there, 1/4 their graduating class. That meant depressingly that 120 were happily married and off to bigger and better things. She took up her station by the food and glanced around. Diane's place was a big Victorian off the town square, absolutely perfect. If the Addams family were real, they would live there. All around her she saw impressive costumes. People had obviously been planning for this for a long time. The invite had come 2 months ago, and in that time she had put together a simple costume for Little Red Riding Hood. She saw a few pirates with what appeared to be real swords and swooping hats, more than a few vampires, gothic, and even a few almost childlike costumes of cowboys and Indians, though done up expensively. She grabbed punch and a brownie made to look like a grave with a gray frosted cookie tombstone. She tried to figure out who everyone was, but 10 years had changed them all, and the costumes were all quite good and concealing. She looked down and resisted the urge to fidget. Working a ranch, even a dude ranch as hers was, kept her in shape. Still, she was more at home in jeans and a loose t-shirt atop a horse than gusset up. Her best friend and business partner Millie had done her makeup and hair, loosely braiding the sunlightened blonde tresses into 2 loose pigtails. The costume she'd made was a red dress, and the skirt showed her legs. The cloak flowed down, tying at her throat, and she wore the hood loose and back. Her domino was a cheap sparkly red one bought at the local farm in Fleet's costume section. Well, off to grandmother's. She jumped at the deep voice and turned, gasping. The man behind her was tan, his hair long and dark. Probably a wig. She didn't know any man of their class with hair both dark and long. His mask was face paint, that of a wolf. He wore armbands and had vermilion paint on his arms. All he wore were buckskin pants and boots, and a cape that was a wolf, the head resting on his, the fangs dipping over his brow. "What are you?" He smiled, the lines of his face strong. "A skinwalker who becomes the big bad wolf." She gulped. Suddenly music started the monster mash. He turned his head in a canine-like gesture. "Care to dance, Red?" It's not my kind of music," she said stupidly. On the ranch men sometimes flirted with her, but as the owner and foreman she was always tough, in control, and had no problem turning them down. Here she felt exposed, vulnerable, and it bothered her that she could not place the man or his voice. His smile was feral, and though it was appealing, a deep tremor of fear took her. Fair enough. So how have the years treated you? Gee, good. He drew closer and she noticed how tall he was. Cripes, there had been no one this good looking from school. Maybe he was a guest of Diane's from her adult life. Whatever he was, whoever he was, he scared something inside her. You have no clue who I am, do you? She shook her head and he smiled, reaching out to brush a lock of hair back. When their skin touched, she gasped, trembling. He smelled of expensive cologne, a wild contrast to the image of his costume. His touch was electric. Gah! He laughed and chucked her chin, turning to meld with the press of bodies. She watched him go, and when he reached the doorway to the dining room he turned, giving her a knowing look. She blushed as red as her dress. Diane came over, laughing. So the game has begun. Gina jumped. Wah! The brunette pirate laughed. Don't tell me you didn't know. I thought everyone knew. Knew what? I have these parties every year for my single friends. Halloween is a time to slip on someone else's skin and do what you normally can't. She winked at that. Blushing, Gina scooped up more punch and drank it deep, wincing at the turn of phrase. What are you talking about? Diane leaned in close, her voice a whisper. You don't have to do anything you like, but tonight if you see anyone interesting, I highly encourage you to talk to him. We're all strangers tonight, no past, no tomorrow, no guilt. Just have fun. The doorbell rang, cutting off any further speech, and Diane left with a wink. Gina stood there feeling lost, yet her eyes looked for a wolf head above the crowd. If she understood Diane, this was a party for completely uninhibited encounters. Her heart began to pound. What would Millie say? Or old Mr. Barrowman, the cattleman she'd inherited from her parents who'd been with the ranch since Custer had ridden west with bravado. Her oldest friends who were always telling her to get out, be young, have fun. Would they approve? She caught sight of the wolf, and he was dancing with the Indian princess. It was a slow song she didn't recognize, the beat low and steady. He moved to the rhythm, and the princess danced with him, but his dark, piercing eyes were on Gina. She turned away and found herself meeting his eyes in a mirror. Who was he? She thought of the tall men with dark hair she'd known in school, and none of them fit. She lined him up with every brunette at graduation in her memory, but he didn't match a single one. Why was she wondering? Wasn't Diane right that if there was no past, no tomorrow, just the present, it made the night more exciting? With that in mind, she felt bold and found another wallflower, a short man dressed as the dread pirate Roberts, looking nervous on the couch. Would you like to dance? He looked shocked but nodded, blushing slightly. The song was Don't Fear the Reaper, and they danced slow and loose, swinging their arms without much grace. Soon they were laughing and talking about the party, the food, the music, all safe subjects. The song ended and Little Red Riding Hood came on, slowing the tempo. She gulped and he looked uncomfortable. Gina waited for him to invite her into the circle of his arms, and then she felt a hand on her shoulder. May I have this dance? It was the wolf. She gulped and turned. Behind her, the pirate accepted the request and scrambled off. Before she could say anything, he stepped close to her and smiled down. I thought you didn't dance. Not to pop music. He laughed. The Monster Mash hasn't been pop music in half a century. Do I make you nervous? Her eyes widened at the forward question. With a sigh, she tried to steady herself even as she followed his steps. Yes. Good. He said nothing more as they danced. She closed her eyes and felt their bodies swaying together, following the rhythm. Why not let go of Gina Collins, rancher, for just one night? Why not become Little Red Riding Hood and let the big bad wolf take her? It was Halloween, a time for magic, a time when the walls that defined life fell. A night to put on another face and act naughty, to demand treats under the threat of a trick. Why not grab this treat? "Come with me to the woods," he whispered in her ear as the song ended. She made no sound but nodded, opening her eyes to see a gleam of victory wash over his painted face. He took her by the hand and led her to the dining room, stopping to dip his hand into a plastic pumpkin on the table by the door. He led her to the kitchen and out the back door, swimming through bodies. They parted the smokers on the patio and hit the jogging path that ran behind the houses. They walked for what felt like hours but was surely just minutes, into the thick woods. All the while her heart pounded. Gina threw herself into the moment, floating above the terror and reaching for exhilaration. He found a clearing a bit smaller than others they had passed, stopped, and pulled her to him. They kissed, her fingers grasping the bands around his arms. She pressed forward, breathlessly lost to the sensations. He moaned low in his throat, and Gina let her hands trail over his shoulders. The wolf cloak slid off as she stroked his shoulders. She pulled back and saw his hair was long and black, flowing lightly in the wind. His face paint was slightly smeared, and she reached up to touch her face, coming back with black and gray. He grinned. "It suits you like wearing the skin of another." She shivered at the cryptic words, and he kissed her again and backed her to a tree. Pressed between the hard bark and his warm body, she could feel his breath against her neck as he lightly nipped. "Relax," he said. "When I bite, I promise you'll like it." She had been tense, but Gina couldn't help it. She had never done anything like this, not even back in college when one-night stands were the norm. It was such a departure from herself that she was riding pure adrenaline. He chuckled. "Are you scared? It is Halloween. If the ghosts are about, I'll protect you. Nothing in the night could be scarier than me." "Boy, you really enjoy this role," she replied breathily. That's my line." He raised his face to smile at her, his teeth starkly white against the smeared face paint. "I believe I'm supposed to eat you." In that moment, the remaining boundaries between them faded entirely. She surrendered completely to the intensity of the situation, her mind reeling as the initial shock gave way to an overwhelming surge of emotion. The physical reality of the choice she had made left her breathless and trembling, her head thrown back as she gave in to the moment. She cried out, and the answering screech of birds eerily came as they took flight away from the noise. Shaking, she could barely stand upright. "So strong, I love your legs. You have a fantastic body. Does this come from riding horses all day?" "Why, how did you know?" He smiled. "It's Arizona, Gina. Everyone is either soft and from the city or firm like you and rides horses." He knew her name. Her eyes flared, and she was unsure whether or not to be elated or terrified. "Who are you?" He chuckled. "Tonight I am your fantasy. Now what will it be, Little Red, trick or treat?" Her breaths came heavy and slow, and she couldn't look away. He didn't move, and she realized he wanted an answer. "Treat, please," she couldn't help but add. He laughed outright, and the intimacy of the moment deepened even further. Gina grabbed at a low bough to hold herself up, feeling helpless in the clutches of the big bad wolf. She rode the experience out, completely overwhelmed by the intensity of it all, feeling shattered yet entirely consumed. When she opened her eyes, he was standing pulling something from his pocket. She saw a condom and breathed a sigh of relief. "But don't you want me to, He grinned again. "Little Red doesn't eat the big bad wolf." In the pale moonlight, the boundary between them was crossed entirely, and she surrendered to the situation as the night took its course. Her eyes closed, and the world narrowed to them, Little Red Riding Hood and the Big Bad Wolf in the Woods. She was a helpless victim of the overwhelming emotions forced on her. Feeling the tension build, thousands of more private stories are waiting in my exclusive archive. The link is in the channel description. When it finally ebbed, she braced her hands on the tree and turned to look over her shoulder. His hair was wild, his breathing rapid, and his eyes were almost black. He looked like a demon, a dark pagan god. She closed her eyes, lost to the fantasy that indeed he was the wolf claiming her. But oh God, the reality was so much better. She rode the waves of the experience with him, completely caught up in the intensity of the moment, until they reached the final climax together. All too soon she sagged and he stepped forward, pressing her body between his and the tree. He kissed her cheek, nibbling at her ear until she turned her head. Capturing her in a kiss, he devoured her mouth, his hands gently stroking. "Who are you?" she asked weakly against his lips. His last kiss was smacking. "A man who has desired you from afar for a very long time." "Please, I must know. One day I will come to you on your ranch and let you see who I truly am. But tonight, just for tonight, we are but a fantasy. One I expect you to dream of every night until I return. Close your eyes." She complied, sighing when he pulled back. She gripped the tree, listening to him move. Why the games? There was no response. Turning, the clearing was empty. There was nothing, no sign of him, no wolf's cowl, no condom or ripped packet, not even her ripped panties. She looked down, but the paint was still there. She breathed a sigh of relief. It had been real, so real. Her body still burned from the pleasure, and though she wanted to wait, she tugged her bra up, tied her dress, and ran back towards the house. It was pure dark, lit only by the sliver moon, and somewhere close an owl hooted. The trees grabbed at her cape, but she pressed on. She was quickly lost and stopped, forcing her breath to calm. Looking to the sky, she saw the stars and oriented herself. Walking slowly, eventually, she found the path that led from the woods to town. Soon the house was in sight, jack-o'-lanterns lining the path. The patio was empty and she went inside, searching each room. The same revelers, loud music and food, in on no wolf. "Diane, Diane," she called to the lady pirate. Diane turned from a deep conversation with a man dressed as Raggedy Andy. "Yes." Gina stopped. "The man I was taking to, dressed as a skinwalker wolf cape thing, who is he?" "What man?" "The wolf." "What on earth happened to your face? You're a mess." The man dressed as a wolf, bare chest, long black hair, face paint. Diane grinned. "Ah, so that explains it. A party crasher, I'm afraid. No one I invited came dressed that way." "But you saw him." Diane crossed her arms. "I saw you dancing with the dread pirate Roberts." "Okay, let's try this. A guy who graduated our year, probably Navajo or part Navajo, tall, like 6'2", long hair, built like a brick shithouse." Diane thought for a long moment. "The only one who comes to mind is Daniel Whitefeather. He was in our freshman bio lab. But he left school sophomore year, transferred, I heard. Gina, he was killed in a car crash 3 years ago on the reservation." Gina felt her heart chill and shatter into 1,000 pieces. "What?" She swayed on her feet and Diane caught her. "It's Halloween, ghosts abound," Raggedy Andy said with a drunken slur. "Excuse me," the hostess brusquely said to him, and walked Gina to the bathroom. Inside, she set her down on the toilet and grabbed a hand towel, wetting it. She pressed it to Gina's face and asked her to remove her mask. Gina did, numb. "Look, it was just something I heard. Maybe it was a rumor, maybe he did what he said he would, went on to become a biologist. And maybe he crashed tonight, looking to scare the devil out of you. He seemed so real but wouldn't tell me his name. He was real." Diane nodded and removed the wet towel, washing it to get the paint out. Well, this paint sure is. Look, now that I think about it, I think it was his brother James Whitefeather that was killed. It was so long ago, read about it in the paper. I just didn't invite Daniel because he didn't graduate with us. Transferred to USC, I believe. Gina nodded numbly. Go ahead, go upstairs and use my computer in the office to check. Then come back and join the party. You're as white as a sheet. You need a drink. She followed Diane out to the stairs and climbed them, finding the office on the third try. The computer was on, so she sat down and opened the browser, letting it load. She searched, and after a few minutes found an obituary for James Whitefeather. He'd been in a car driven by his brother. They were returning from a family wedding in Chicago, had driven straight through. Daniel had gotten drowsy, crossed the center line, and they hit a truck. James was killed instantly, and Daniel was injured severely. A later article said charges were dropped when they found a blown tire had caused it, and the trucker they'd hit suddenly recalled seeing the tire blow. She sat back and sighed with relief. Daniel probably just didn't want to deal with all that baggage, preferring the role of dark stranger. Feeling better, she went down and got more punch. She chatted with Dread Pirate Roberts and a woman dressed as a mermaid. After a time, she caught sight of the Indian princess coming in from a smoke on the patio. "Excuse me," she said to her companions and ran to intercept the woman. "Hi, I'm sorry, but were you dancing with a man dressed as a skinwalker before?" The woman stiffened. "I would never, that's highly offensive." "I'm sorry, so you are Navajo," the woman nodded. "Do you remember Daniel Whitefeather, transferred out of school sophomore year?" "Yes, why?" "I saw you dancing with him. He was dressed as a skinwalker." "I danced but with, I don't remember. I've had a lot to drink." She touched her temple and shook her head. "Anyway, a skinwalker is offensive. In our culture, it is a kind of witch who can take the form of any animal. They are pure legend, but people have tried, and they are always a grave danger." "Why is that?" The princess looked at her like she was a slow child. "They live to take skins, become new people, and the only way to become one is to kill a member of your family. Now, if you'll excuse me, on a night like Halloween, I find this conversation distasteful. Want to discuss your ancestors burning witches?" "No, I'm sorry," Gina mumbled. She watched her walk away, her heart pounding. Kill a member of their family. There was no arguing it. Daniel had killed his brother James. Intentional or not, he had done it. They lived to take skins. Heart pounding, she found her purse in the downstairs bedroom and fished out her phone, calling Millie at the ranch. "Hello," her friend sleepily answered. "Sorry to bother you, and you won't believe me, but this is highly important. Do not accept a reservation from a Daniel Whitefeather. I think he wants to kill me." "Wait, what? You can't be serious. Someone by that name just checked in late. I just showed him to his room and laid back down. He seemed harmless." The room began to spin. "Millie, you have to get out. Get out now. He's dangerous." "Gina, I..." There was a scream and the phone dropped. There was silence and Gina stood there trembling. "Millie, Millie." The phone rustled as someone picked it up. She heard deep breaths and then a familiar voice. "I'm going to enjoy taking her place, Gina. But don't worry, I won't take yours just yet. I like making you scream too much." The line went dead. I hope you enjoyed this story. More intimate confessions are waiting in the private archive linked in the description. Subscribe for the next story.